Hey guys, so today I'm going to show you how to hip thrust. I'm going to show you the proper form and different variations that you guys can do to feel different types of muscles working. So first we're going to start off with the regular, just basic form. You're going to want to have a chair or a bench behind you. Research has shown that about 14 inches high is a sweet spot for women, and about 16 inches high is a sweet spot for men. Personally, if you don't want to take out your measuring tape, what I do is I try to just align it with the bottom of my shoulder blades. Most gym benches are going to hit you at a spot that's above your shoulder blades, so you might need to put something underneath you to make sure that you're at the optimal height. For example, this is a commercial gym bench, so I have a book underneath my bottom so that it hits me at the right spot. So once you have that set up and you're at the right position and the right height level, we're going to get into the hip thrust. So when it comes to the hip thrust, you're going to want to bend your legs to the point where when you thrust up, you have a 90-degree bend at the top of the movement. So if I put my feet here, my toes are pointed straight, my knees are in line with my toes, and they stay that way throughout the entire movement, and I thrust up, I should have a 90-degree bend in my knees. Now, in terms of the entire movement, when you're coming up, you really want to keep your core tight, push through your heels, and make sure that your knees don't cave in. Because when your knees cave in, then you're not utilizing all the proper muscle groups that you could be utilizing if you were doing it properly. So just be aware of that, be aware of your knees, be aware of your core, and be aware of your head. That's very, very important because your head will prevent you from overextending your back. So when you thrust up into a hip thrust up. At the top of a hip thrust, you're going to want to make sure that your head is up and you're looking straight ahead and that you're not overextending your back. That's why we say to keep our head looking forward, because if you look back, you have more of a tendency to do this, and then you're putting your lower back at risk. So you really need to keep your head up, which, by the way, in the beginning will take some muscle developing. I remember being super sore in my neck the first few hip thrusts that I did because I was just like, why is my head so heavy? But you really have to keep looking forward. So when you look forward, you really create that straight back line and you really prevent the injury from happening. Now, once you've got all that set and you're going like this and you got it down pat, but you're not feeling it in your glutes, what do? There are two reasons why you might not be feeling your glutes in a hip thrust. One, you may be very hamstring dominant. If you are hamstring dominant, then when you complete the hip thrust, your hamstrings may be firing at a greater extent than your glutes. If this is the case, then hip thrust may be a little bit more difficult to feel your activation. So you might feel it more in a glute bridge. A glute bridge is the same thing as a hip thrust, just there is no bench involved. So you're relying on the floor. But because you're relying on the floor, your knees are no longer at a 90-degree angle, they are at a smaller angle. And because of that, your hamstrings are put at a disadvantage. So if you are a hamstring dominant person, putting your hammies at a disadvantage when you're trying to work your glutes may be your perfect solution. But if you are not hamstring dominant and you are still not feeling your glutes, or you are hamstring dominant and you really like the hip thrust like I do, there is another way that you could try to increase the glute activation, and that is by creating a posterior pelvic tilt. So that is essentially taking your hips at the top of the movement and scooping them in. It could be a little bit difficult to understand at first, but I'm going to demonstrate it. So first off, you can hip thrust regularly, so your entire body is moving with the movement. You should try not to do this, but at the beginning, I understand that most people will result into this movement. A posterior pelvic tilt, though, means finishing the movement with solely your hips. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. So I'm going, and then I'm finishing with my hips. I'm going to go down, and then same thing, I'm finishing with my hips. I hope that you can see the difference. It's a very subtle difference, regular, and then posterior pelvic tilt. So this might cause you to feel your glutes a little bit more. I know personally for me, it really does make a difference. It starts to burn a lot quicker, and I learned this from Brett Contreras, so you can try it. It does take a little bit of practice to get it down and to understand really turning in your pelvis. That's the only kind of way that I can explain it, but as you see in the video clips, it's really just finishing the movement with your hips, not finishing the movement with your full torso, but really just like that. Now, if you want to work your hamstrings, let's say you are firing with your glutes, but you really just want to work those hammies today, but you got hip thrust in your program, or you feel like doing some hip thrust, you can do the hip thrust in a hamstring dominant movement. The way you would do that is you're just going to move your legs a little bit forward, so you are no longer creating that 90 degree, you are creating a larger degree, which means you're putting the hamstrings at an advantage. So if your legs are less than 90, they are at a disadvantage. Regular, depending how you are made genetically, you know, you can feel them firing, you could not as much, depending. But then when they're at a wider angle, your hamstrings will be firing like crazy. So if you want to do a hip thrust that's hamstring dominant, just put them a little forward and then thrust up like that. And I guarantee you that you will be feeling your hamstrings working a lot more in this position. Now, when you get a little bit more advanced, there are different fun variations that you can do. You can do the single leg hip thrust like this, and you can do wide stance, sumo stance hip thrust, which is kind of like super wide like this, and then, but I don't recommend doing this way in front of anybody. But yeah, so that's the hip thrust. I hope you guys enjoyed that. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment or DM me. It is my favorite movement. I do it in every workout. Honestly, it's so much fun, and it is the best exercise to build your lower body. That's how I built my lower body. I've been doing hip thrusts for 3.5 years now, and I just never get sick of them. So I hope you guys enjoyed this and found this helpful. And yeah, if you have any questions, just let me know, and have a great rest of your day. And I hope that you are all staying safe, and God bless.